The neuron is the basic cell that comprises the nervous system and receives and sends messages throughout our body, giving us the ability to feel. It is made up of different parts, including dendrites, which are branching fibers that receive information from sensory receptors or other neurons and conduct impulses towards the cell body. The cell body, or soma, is the central area of the neuron cell that maintains the well-being of the cell and contains the traditional organelles like the nucleus. It also runs the cell by telling the entire neuron whether or not to fire. The axon is a single long fiber connecting the cell body with the terminal branches. Information passes down the axon to other neurons or gland cells. Some axons are covered in myelin sheaths, which are segments of fatty tissue made from lipids that provide insulation, protection, and increased transmission speed of neural impulses. The terminal branches and buttons at the end of the axon form junctions with other cells and contain neurotransmitters which they release and send across the synapse. The synaptic gap is the space in between two neurons that causes a brief interruption in the transmission of impulses. This gap is where neurotransmitters are exchanged from the sending neuron to the receiving one. When a neuron is inactive and not firing a neural impulse, it is said to be at resting potential. It is polarized with a slightly negative charge inside the neuron because of more potassium ions inside and more sodium ions outside. When a neuron is signaled, a depolarizing current rushes through the cell and must reach a certain level or threshold in order for the resting potential to fire an action potential. Action potential is the release of a neural impulse as a brief electrical charge that travels down the axon and causes a reversal of the electrical charge within. Right before and during action potential, the neuron undergoes depolarization, where sodium ions rush out and potassium ions rush into the cell, making the neuron positive for a brief moment. When the threshold level of a neuron is reached, an action potential will always fire at 100% every time. This is known as the all or none principle, in which a neuron completely fires or doesn't fire at all. The purpose of action potentials are to send messages on to the next neuron by releasing neurotransmitters across the synapse. They are released by one neuron's vesicles and bind to specific receptor sites on the receiving neuron, either enhancing or inhibiting the next neuron's action potential. Reuptake is a process after the action potential in which neurotransmitters are taken back into the vesicles on the presynaptic terminal button that release them. Finally, the neuron goes through the process of repolarization in the refractory period, or the time it takes for the cell to be ready for a second stimulus once it returns to its resting state.